South African prosecutors and the Hawks have arrested several former executives of public logistics company Transnet, which is at the center of a high-profile investigation into corruption during Jacob Zuma's tenure as president. South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority says Transnet's former chief executive officer Brian Molefe and finance chief Anoj Singh were among 4 people being held in connection with the multi-million-dollar corruption case. The executives are facing charges of fraud and breaching public finance regulations linked to a 93 million rand corruption and fraud case surrounding the 2015 procurement of more than 1,000 locomotives. Joining me now from Pretoria, South Africa is Sindisiwe Seboka. She's the national spokesperson for the Investigation Directorate of the National Prosecuting Authority. Sindisiwe, thank you for joining me on Business Edge. Let's start with a look at the allegations that have been made against the former top executives of Transnet. So just take us through the charges or the allegations they're facing as of now.
Okay, so the former executives is firstly about 10 people that we've actually brought to court. These are former Transnet group executives as well as contractors that basically benefited from various contracts to the tune of about 398.4 million within the period of about 2015. But what we also found is that some of the former executives are arraigned for basically assisting in the signing off of those particular irregularities and double invoicing that took place for advisory services of the buying or procuring of the 1064 locomotive deal for Transnet. So the accused now stand accused of breaching of the Public Finance Management Act and fraud. That's for the former executives. And then the other accused stand accused of fraud as well as corruption. And one other gentleman, Mr. Kubenteren Moodley from Albertine, he basically stands accused for pocketing about 74 million of that amount, and he stands charged with money laundering.
So how did these crimes, or at least the allegations of these crimes, come to light?
So the Zondo Commission, you would know, has been having hearings since 2018 about what transpired at various state-owned entities, what transpired in government, and what basically transpired in what was termed the state capture era. What we've since found out through the testimony that was being heard there is that Transnet was brought to its knees through various corrupt deals, money being given to people for doing absolutely nothing, while they were, in this particular contract to be exact, advisory services was basically advising if Transnet would be able to get a specific amount of money to buy the trains that Transnet later procured, the 1064. And you would know that looking at the accomplished persons within Transnet, it's something that many people within the Zondo Commission, including Mr. Francis Kala, the former engineer from Transnet, had said there were skilled persons to be able to give that analysis, to basically say, if you need a loan from various countries, a club loan, this is how much you need to do, and this is what you have to go about it. But external parties were brought in, and Transnet, according to our court papers, was defrauded over 398 million.
Okay, so the Zondo Commission has been a judicial commission of inquiry into state capture, which has been linked to Jacob Zuma, the former president's tenure. In this particular case, which also seems to involve the Gupta family or the Gupta brothers, what's the link there? Because there are some linkages that go back to the former president as well as the Gupta family.
So you would know that as the NPA, we stay clear of basically linking persons until we have them actually cuffed and brought to court for a particular case. So with that said, that is exactly what we're going to do now, is that the persons arrested and brought before court are the people that we have fingered through evidence that they have a case to answer to. However, the bigger picture of what necessarily transpired in terms of state capture was basically various persons testifying, linking the former president to all kinds of capture, so you were quote unquote by the various persons who have come to the commission. But in this particular case, we always stay guarded to avoid mentioning persons unless we have a case against them.
All right, so let's go back to this locomotive situation. It was about a little over 1,000 locomotives that were meant to be purchased, and of course they brought in JB Morgan at a time, then they changed them for another advisory firm. There was all kind of conversation around it, so it coming to around 93 million, and then you of course have talked about the cost to Transnet running into about 300 million rand. So we can put those figures to Transnet and we can put the figures to the fraud, but corruption goes a bit further than that. So from the National Prosecuting Authority's stance, what has a case like this involving high-level figures at a public enterprise, a publicly owned company, what has it cost South Africans? What has it cost South Africa's economy?
It's definitely crippled the economy, looking at how persons were basically piggy banking and benefiting from knowing persons in high positions. So what this case, or the reason behind this case, besides the following of the evidence, is to show the public that whoever you are, no matter the rank, we will definitely get you arrested and brought to court to answer to a case if the evidence shows or points your direction. But you'd know there have been various figures that have been going around as to how much the South African fiscus has cost. Others were giving the figures of money amounting to billions of rands over the 10-year period, and some saying it could even be in the trillions. But what we've uncovered now is at least a bit or a picture of what exactly happened. And looking at this particular case, we were able to find that the similar modus operandi or similar way in which they were doing things was done in various other state-owned entities. We've got another case called the Nulani matter, where similar modus was used to basically defraud that particular department. So this case for us is also a confirmation that the modus used in other matters that we've initially found in our investigations is what continued and possibly continued up until the early 2000s, if not further.
Okay, so let me piggyback off of that, because you talk about other state entities. Even the some of the accused in this case also at one point in time served at Eskom, or rather worked at Eskom, which is the national power utility, which now is load shedding, has also in some manner people would say has crippled the South African economy because of its inability to provide electricity. So when you look at the documentation of the Zondo Commission, which runs into thousands of pages and a number of avenues to further the investigation, what does it say about the levels and the depth of corruption, particularly in South African state-owned entities, which are meant to provide a service for the people and push the economy forward?
Yes, it's actually quite scary when you actually go through the recommendations so proposed by the Chief Justice Raymond Zondo as to what exactly transpired. And he also notes in many of his recommendations that the recommendations he made, he also suggests that there be further independent investigations through the various legal routes that we have in South Africa, which is the Hawks, IPID if it involves police officials, as well as the police itself. So what we basically have seen through combing through those particular recommendations, because we have the fortunate or unfortunate task of having to comb through each and every aspect of that particular detailed recommendations that were basically tabled. We found that Eskom also suffered a similar fate, but we've already enlisted a particular case, a 745 million rand case, Husile, which pertains to Husile, a power station situated in Mpumalanga, in South Africa, where that amount of money was basically given to a particular service provider for not doing much. Husile is still suffering to date because of that. And that is one of the power stations that was supposed to assist to alleviate this load shedding issue that we have in our country. We were also able to restrain assets for about 1.4 billion in that particular respect last year, pertaining to the persons that have been fingered, former officials, as well as the contractors and or subcontractors in that matter. However, more money still needs to be followed. And that's the mammoth task that we basically following, including an optimum coal mine matter. We've been able to restrain preserve that particular mine for about 3.4 billion. However, we need to go back to court and fight for it to be finally forfeited to the state and sold for its true value to try and recoup what was lost.
So what happens next in this case? I know lawyers have said that two of those involved will plead not guilty. There's also been an application for bail. What are the next few steps that we should be looking for?
The next step is that on the 7th of September, one of the accused is going to actually be requesting a bail relaxation, which the state is going to oppose vigorously so. The next step after that is on the 14th of October. The matter returns to court with all the accused, where we are hoping to have arrested further accused, the further and final group of a cohort of accused, and to then provide the indictment. so that all the accused can know what it is exactly that they're charged with, and the matter can proceed from there.
So it might be preemptive because there has to be, of course, structure, and the law will be followed in the sentencing of these individuals. But for the National Prosecuting Authority, and with how deep the Zondo Commission report has really shaken South Africa, what does justice look like? Is it jail term? Is it returning the money? What does justice really look like in a situation which has cost the South African economy as well as the people?
So justice has basically got many facets from the NPA's perspective. First and foremost, it includes people going to jail and serving a particular sentence, direct imprisonment, as well as suspended sentence for some persons. It also looks like the payment of proceeds of crime, which could run in the billions. We are trying to recoup as much as we possibly can to go into the South African Kara account, which is the account where proceeds of crime go into, which is then put back into the strengthening of law enforcement to prevent further looting or prevent further prevention methods to avoid such situations happening again. And then another third facet, which also include the stringent policies placed in many state-owned entities and government departments to red flag situations like this to avoid them happening again. And lastly, the fourth point would be for South Africans to have more confidence in the South African justice system in its totality, including law enforcement.
All right, Sindisiwe, Seboka, thank you so much for your time. We'll be following this conversation and this case very closely, so we will definitely be speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And it is one case again tied to the Zondo Commission that has reverberations across South Africa and again linking the former president Jacob Zuma to a number of graft, fraud and corruption issues. It's a case we've been following for a while and one we will continue to do so. Up next on Business Edge, it is Wednesday. While social media might be doing Women Crush Wednesday, we're doing Women in Business. Do stick around.